What is up, guys? Welcome to episode 6 of Inner Alchemy. I'm your host, Sandal Roy, and today we are talking about the article that just came out in New York Magazine about the International School of Temple Arts, also known as ISTA, and the accusations of sexual misconduct against this organization. Okay, I wanted to discuss this. Obviously, it's really it kind of really dovetails with a lot of the things that we talk about here, talking about divine union, about sacred sexuality. They refer to themselves as a mystery school, and y'all know that if you've been with me for a while, you know that one of my main templates, gift templates that I'm bringing through is channeling the hidden and occulted and stolen mystery school teachings of Ishtar from the Levantine and the MENA region. So a lot of, it's kind of has a lot of parallels with what I talk about. And ISTA as well, obviously, I wanted to also look at the intersection of Zionism as well, because ISTA is an organization, one of the founding members is Israeli. Several of their leadership have served in the Israeli occupation forces, and they are very, very well known in Israel. They've done many retreats there. So, a lot of their membership, their community is Israeli Zionist, and many of their leadership, like I said, will have served in the Israeli occupation forces. So hopefully it should be a good episode. Does come with a content warning that we are going to be discussing, the accusations against them of sexual misconduct and rape as well. So, just be mindful of that when going in. So depending on what we talk about, I am going to talk about some of the allegations specifically. If any of the content I feel like is too spicy or too disturbing to publish on YouTube and all the other podcast players, then I will be putting it on my Patreon, which you can sign up in the link below. Okay, there will be full-length, unedited podcast episodes that you can view in full there, okay, completely raw, unfiltered. Okay, there's a lot of things that I'm going to be dropping going forward, a lot of knowledge that I'm going to be dropping that I don't feel comfortable expressing so publicly. So that's kind of like the first initiation, so to speak, of my own personal mystery school that I'm bringing to you guys here. Okay, so, I'm just looking at my notes here. I've just been kind of reading the article. I'll put the article that the Cut, New York Magazine, published on ISTA, so that you can view it for free. Obviously, you have to kind of subscribe and it's behind a paywall, but I have, a lot of people who have been following what's been happening with this particular organization that many have referred to as a cult because of the really problematic dynamics displayed there. People have been widely sharing the article, so I will also be sharing that to you so that you can view it without having to subscribe. Okay, so let's talk about ISTA being a mystery school, okay? And obviously it's kind of, like I said in the reel that I posted on Instagram, it's kind of problematic. I don't really like the fact that their name ISTA is so similar to Ishtar, who is the original goddess of the ancient mystery school temples. She was the goddess of Hieros Gamos, which, if you've been following me for a while, means divine union, sacred union. You and your divine beloved coming into divine union, intimacy, sex with God, okay? It's like a trifecta, okay? It's, what's the word? It's a trinity. It's like Trinity in the Matrix, okay? When Neo, the one, meets his, feminine counterpart, his twin flame, she is the trifecta. She is the triple goddess, okay? And it's a trinity. It's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, okay? It's the Godhead, the Shekinah, the feminine, and the masculine in sacred union, okay? So those were the original mystery school teachings. Now, what I've been able to channel in the field, and you should go back and look at some of my previous videos where I talk about this, although I haven't spoken about everything that's been channeled in the field around what happened in the ancient mystery school temples. Some of that came through with clients, and I do want to kind of talk about it more in future transmissions, and then maybe even write a book at some point. There were things that happened in the mystery school temples that were outside of God's design and outside of God's plan for us. Okay, there were things that were distorted. There was, things like partner swapping. I've seen partner swapping happening, like priests and priestesses deciding that, in order to kind of enhance their gifts, because sex is very powerful. Okay, like they do have this one thing right. Okay, they've basically designed this mystery school. It's at the intersection of how they describe it is that it's at the intersection of shamanism, spirituality, and sexuality. So it's got a strong focus on sexuality. And the mystery school the mystery school temples of Ishtar and Inanna also had an emphasis on sexuality, but it was not only sexuality. Like a sexuality, I feel like from what I've channeled, was kind of central to it, because your sexual energy, your kundalini, your life force that it animates your vessel, that it basically starts in your sexual centers, your root and your sacral, and then moves upwards and connects you to God. So it is sexual energy. So the body is a bridge through which we can experience God, and how we do that is through love, through pleasure, and through sex with a divine beloved. But the reason why I have particular disdain for this organization is because of the very distorted way in which they're teaching this. Okay, because having people in a room all doing rituals together where they're all engaging sexually with like multiple different people in a group setting is quite profane, and it is very blasphemous to what was taught in the original mystery school temples. Okay, a lot of how I've spoken before, how those temples, basically all we know of those temples now is that they had these hierodules, these sacred whores where men could go and be healed by these women, these courtesans, these dakinis, and these priestesses, and they could go and engage in sacred sex, and that just wasn't how it originally was. Okay, there had to be very, very high levels of initiation for a priestess to initiate her consort, who would be the priest. Okay, the queen would be the priestess would be the queen, the high priestess would be the queen, and the high priest would be the king. And then there was a hierarchical structure as well. Okay, and these temples, basically the teachings were stolen from them. The library at Alexandria, which had all the mystery school teachings, was burnt. It was stolen by the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans, who basically founded the empire under which we're still enslaved. Obviously it's moved from different, it's no longer ancient Greece, it's no longer Rome, but it's still these same bloodline families, okay, that stole those teachings and started the secret societies that we now know. And it's a lot of distorted codes, okay, and we're going to talk about some of the distorted codes that they're teaching and how they manipulate people into thinking that sacred sexuality is something that you can do with multiple people. Obviously, I know that a lot of the mediation and accountability processes that have been put in place against ISTA have been put by other people within the sacred sexuality space. And what do they call themselves? I mean, they call themselves sacred sexuality. I would beg to differ that anything that's involving multiple people or polyamory is sacred. I've spoken about that in a previous video, talking about can polyamory or ethical non-monogamy be sacred. So go have a look at my reasoning for why I don't believe that polyamory or sharing, multiple partners is sacred. Okay, it has to do with your light body architecture and the Hieros Gamos system that God designed for us to access and know him or her through the way that he structured our body, and the way that we fall in love with a divine counterpart that's usually the opposite sex, not always. And anything outside of that is not the pathway back to God. Okay, it's not the direct path. Not saying that you can't meander and get lost and, you know, dip your toes in ethical non-monogamy and eventually find your way. You can. I did. I've spoken about that in that video. And that's why I take that position now, okay? Because the ultimate pathway back to the divine is you and your soulmate serving God through your mission. So, yeah, I just, you know, for me, it is personal, okay? I had somebody who approached me on TikTok when I, you know, I've been on Instagram for many years. Recently, like maybe 2-3 years ago, started a TikTok and started posting all my shorts on there, and was contacted by somebody who had a podcast who was like immediately like, oh wow, love what you're doing, love what you're teaching, have you heard of ISTA? You'll love them, they teach very similar stuff to what you teach. And I was just like, no they don't. I'd already heard of ISTA. I was like, no they don't. I'd already been long programmed myself out of the polyamory psyop, and so I already knew that ISTA was about that kind of like, you know, let's all have an orgy type of thing. And I'd seen a lot of that in Bali as well. Like those of you who've been following me for a long time will know I lived in Bali for many years. Bali has a very big kind of false light yoga. You know, it's a beautiful spiritual community. There's a lot of healers, a lot of light workers, a lot of raw food, veganism, yoga, ecstatic dance. You know, it's a beautiful place to go for healing. There's a lot of tantrikas, and some people who are actually doing a lot of good work. But there's also a lot of like Neo-Tantra and a lot of like leaky sexual energy, a lot of polyamory, a lot of people with sexual wounding and not in their power, and just I just saw a lot of gross bullshit when I was living there. So when I started hearing about ISTA, you know, wanting to learn more about Tantra, people were like, yeah, go to ISTA. And I looked up on YouTube and I was just like, this is the top Tantra school? You've got to be kidding me. Like, this cannot be what Tantra is all about. Luckily, I found Himalayan Kriya Yoga after that. You know, there's also issues with yogic lineages that teach proper white Tantra as well, okay? There can be issues with spiritual narcissists and predators in those lineages as well, okay? Which is a subject for another podcast. But, you know, this whole Neo-Tantra that's teaching red Tantra, which is basically what they say from a Western lens. They say that red Tantra is basically Tantra that focuses on sexuality, but it's not Tantra, okay? Tantra basically means to weave, okay? It's a religious philosophy or spiritual philosophy that comes from India, and it's about weaving spirit and matter. It's about uniting with the divine, okay? It has a lot of overlaps with yoga. It's a lot to do with light body architecture. It's a lot to do with ritual. It's a lot to do with finding sacred ways of living. It's not really got that much to do with sex, okay? But there is some teachings on sexuality and on kundalini, sexual life force and things like that, and, you know, sacred sexuality, and some teachings on sex magic and the proper way of lovemaking. But in true traditional tantric teachings, though the teachings that they have on sexuality and lovemaking involve a divine beloved. Like, it's not multiple people, okay? The whole multiple people Western Tantra, red Tantra scene was basically brought to the West by mainly Osho, who has long been outed as a cult leader and a sexual predator, okay? And secondly, Aleister Crowley, who everybody knows is a dark occultist, a Satanist. He would regularly have orgies with himself and his followers. He would make his female partners have sex with goats and things like that. He would practice black magic, channel demons and things like that. He was a Satanist. So these are not like spiritual teachings that you want to be learning about and practicing if you're a person who is suffered any kind of trauma, sexual trauma, or trauma that affects your sexuality and your interpersonal relationships, okay, which is any kind of trauma usually does, okay. This is the one thing that a lot of people are having issues with, is interpersonal relationships and sexuality. Now, I'm not saying that people can't study, dark occultism, Satanism and things like that. I've studied it, okay. I do think that if you're involved in, what's the word? Dark arts training is necessary, okay. I could not be a healer if I didn't do dark arts training. I could not teach what I teach about exposing the satanic agenda on this planet if I hadn't studied Satanism and I didn't know how to identify it, okay. So I'm not saying, I'm not treating people like children and saying that you shouldn't study any of the occult or the darker stuff, okay. Just be mindful, like do it in, I just think it's something that you should be studying by yourself, not in a transformational container, which is what they call themselves, what ISTA calls themselves, okay. A transformational container where you've got people that are initiated into esoteric knowledge and other people who are wounded and seeking healing. You've got a massive power differential between those two people, and that is ripe for abuse, okay. When you have a power differential like that, you just have a situation in which spiritual gaslighting can take place more easily, and this is what we're seeing with ISTA and why there have been so many complaints about them, okay, because they ask people to sign a disclaimer. Firstly, what happens at their retreats and their workshops is shrouded in secrecy, which that's kind of understandable for a mystery school. I get that. You want to make sure that the teachings are safely guarded, okay, and you have proper NDAs in place that people aren't going to reveal those teachings to people outside who haven't been initiated. Completely get that. I completely understand their reasoning for that. But when it comes to sexual content and where there's going to be things that take place that are of a sexual nature, particularly between students and teachers, because that's a thing that's allowed, okay. Students and teachers are allowed to engage sexually, like they'll do rituals where sexual stuff will happen, okay. Let's actually refer to the article, okay. So in the article, and you should read it by yourself, in fact, pause this video and go read the article yourself and then come back, but in the article, they outline a few of the things that happen at level 1, okay. So they'll do exercises where they get people to stand naked in front of the whole group and practice disconnecting their mind from their body, and imagine that their body is a horse and the mind is a rider. So you're trying to listen. It's strange. It's weirdly setting people up. It's like a grooming process where you're getting people to, I get it's important to listen to the body, okay. This is part of feminine embodiment, okay. This is part of the priestess path is about listening to the body and the intuitive hits that it gives you, okay. But you also need to listen to your mind, okay. Hieros Gamos is about uniting the masculine and the feminine, okay. So if the body is feminine, the mind is masculine, okay. You can't disconnect the two, okay. Otherwise you're going to be in a state of disassociation, okay. So if you're feeling urges in your body, like you want to engage sexually with somebody who it wouldn't be appropriate with, the mind is there to say, oh no, there's a fuck boy or a fuck girl, or I have a partner, or whatever it is, like one of the things that kind of annoys me is listening to I was listening to an interview with Baba Des, the founder, and I get why this place is popular because he says so many good things, it's like Andrew Tate, right? Why Andrew Tate became so popular, because he says so many things that are correct, but is just a bad person. He's just an immoral, shady, morally questionable person. So, you know, that's kind of how spiritual narcissists and predators get people to trust them. Okay, they learn a bunch of esoteric knowledge and use it to kind of be like a Pied Piper, leading people down the wrong path. You know, you say like 80% good things, you're like, yes, sex is so healing and it connects you to God, and that's true, 100%. Sex can be very healing, and yes, it is our bridge to the divine, okay? Especially when you do it with your divine beloved, your soulmate, your genetic equal, your twin flame, the person that God has designed for you, where you match each other perfectly like a lock in a key. Sex with that person is going to take you to another level, okay? But even sex with, you know, somebody who there's a lot of love and there's a lot of care, and maybe the two aren't, you know, genetic equals, but there is still a lot of, you know, positive regard, and the two are in a healthy, functional relationship. That can also be very healing, and you can also access God's love and have, you know, very intense cervical orgasms in that kind of union as well. But just because sex is healing and you can touch God doesn't mean that you should just do it with everyone, or with whomever, or with somebody that you just met at the retreat, or somebody that you don't even really know that well in the middle of a ritual. Like, some of these rituals are crazy. So yeah, what was I going to say? 1 second. Yeah, sex is one of those things that, like, if done correctly, it's the most beautiful thing that you can experience on this planet, and if done incorrectly, is one of the most traumatizing things that you can experience on this planet. So that's why I think it's so important to talk about and to educate people about. And I think that, you know, I'm not saying that there isn't a place for sexual education to take place in a way that's very energetically clean, safe, and ethical, okay? I know several sexual educators in the sacred sexuality space who do it in a way that's very clean and very ethical, like not violating anybody's boundaries, not disrespecting anybody's relationships, not disrespecting just the whole template of divine union itself. And, you know, using, like, educating people into how to, you know, do practices like de-armoring, you know, in the vagina, for example. If you have any kind of sexual trauma, the vagina can hold on to that trauma. So, you know, things like learning how to use a crystal wand or a yoni egg. Like, check out the ones that I use from Tay Feminine Wellness, who has very kindly sponsored this episode. She does the most, her name's Aisha, she's an amazing lady, I connected with her years ago, and she does these beautiful crystals, and, you know, crystal wands and yoni eggs for a self-pleasure practice, or for you and your beloved to play with at home. You can, you know, she does ebooks where you can learn together how to de-armor, or even just by yourself, you know, using the yoni egg, doing practices to kind of open that area up, get the energy moving, like unblock tension. And also, for me personally, I absolutely adore the Black Obsidian Yoni Egg. I've talked about this so many times. For cord removal and for absorbing a negative energy from past partners, you can actually use it. It actually draws out so much negative energy that you will actually physically feel it throb inside you. And it definitely removes cords that attach you to previous partners. I've spoken about in my Sexual Misery podcast. I used it to remove the cord from a previous relationship. And literally the next day I had an email from that ex-boyfriend apologizing for everything that happened and saying that he'd like to close this energetic account that he's left open with me. And we'd been a year no contact. So do check out the Black Obsidian Yoni egg. She also does amazing, she does the nephrite jade egg. She does a rose quartz one, which is beautiful. If you're like, needing a little bit more self-love in your life, you'll really feel the energy of that is like much softer and more, it's got a more delicate feeling. So use my code ISTA15 to get 15% off at checkout, and you're welcome. Hope you enjoy using them. Okay, so back to the transmission. Where was I? So another ritual that they do at ISTA is in the level 1 training that they listed in the article, is they will do a group yoni gazing ritual. So they'll get one of the female participants to strip from the waist down or fully strip, and everybody will just gaze at her yoni. Now, yoni gazing is a very powerful practice that you can do with a beloved. It's very meditative, because the thing is that, for those of you who studied, the esoteric sexual arts, the temple arts, the mystery school teachings, if you look at the depiction of Mother Mary as she's depicted in kind of the Catholic Church, and lots of depictions of her, it's actually depicting the primary sacred feminine. The yoni, the portal, because the yoni is a portal to the divine. So, yoni gazing is a very, very powerful practice. I do recommend that you actually do it with your beloved, not with the random person. It actually can kind of take you into this transcendent space, and it's really bonding, and really, you can generate a lot of intimacy between the two of you. And if you have any kind of hang-ups for women, a lot of women have like hang-ups about down there, about how it looks and things like that, or have been, shamed and made to feel self-conscious about it. It can be a really powerful process, a really powerful practice of reconnecting to that space and feeling cherished and adored and loved and worshipped like the goddess that you are. So it is a powerful practice, but I think doing it in a group setting where you've got people that don't have good, that might be sexually traumatized. There's a lot, I think, there's a high likelihood that a lot of people coming to the workshops are sexually traumatized and are not highly initiated into the occult or the esoteric. They would be manipulated into participating in a workshop like this. And I just think it's quite predatory, and this is tame. Okay, this is tame compared to some of the rituals that they'll do. Okay, and it's when listening to Baba Des, everything sounds really good. He's just like, it's all about love. Whether you're celibate or monogamous, or whether you want to be with multiple people, it's about, just how connected are you to yourself, and then you can connect to other people. So they make it seem, and they have said that it's, open to everyone. Like, not just people who are into open style relationships, or people who are single and wanting to kind of learn how to connect with others and be intimate with others in a safe setting, but it's also open to people who might be celibate or monogamous. And I would say that is not the case, okay? Because if most of your rituals are like that, and the person, that's not monogamy, okay? Like, gazing at somebody else's yoni is not monogamy, even if you're both there together. If it's just the two of you, okay, fine, maybe that's monogamy. But if you're in a setting in a shared field where there's other people also engaging sexually, that's not really monogamy. It's kind of, I wouldn't say necessarily it's like polyamory unless you're actually swapping partners, but I would say it's like monogamish. It's you're using the presence of other people to kind of fuel your sexual connection between the two of you, which is not really monogamy. So I would say and that's one of the complaints that have been made against them, is that they advertise themselves as being open to all and safe for monogamous people, and that's not the case at all. And I would definitely agree with that. So, I think one of the things that came up a lot in a lot of the interviews that I watched from Baba Des, and also he was one of the founders, and also other practitioners who were in the, and it basically ISTA operates like a MLM style cult. So it's like, I guess, like a mystery school. You move up the levels, so you initiate higher and higher, and then you become part of the inner circle and a kind of a practitioner who can also help out. So that structure in itself has been criticized as well, because it encourages things like nepotism and people engaging sexually with the hope of advancing within the organization, because the financial compensation for doing these workshops is pretty good. Like, a lot of these teachers are paid really, really well for hosting these workshops. So one of the things that a lot of people were kind of bringing up in their story about, why ISTA has been so healing for them, is talking about purity culture. And, a lot of them obviously grew up in very religious, conservative backgrounds. And look, I totally hear that, okay? I don't think I ever would have become sexually wounded and damaged and promiscuous at a young age if it hadn't been for some kind of purity culture and expectations that were put upon me as a young teenager, and not really understanding how to navigate that in London, in the West, where I was growing up, where the culture is very much like hedonistic, hypersexualized, grooming young girls into being, hypersexual, and that's, you'll be pretty, the more fuckable you are, the prettier and more desirable you are, and the more guys want you, the more guys you sleep with, the more you're wanted. And that was the kind of culture that I grew up in as a kind of, I'm an elder millennial, like I'll be 40 in like 2 months. So that's what my generation was. Okay, I know it's slightly different from for Gen Z. I understand that Gen Z statistically are having a lot less sex than we did, millennials in our generation. But the era that I grew up in just was so promiscuous and porn addicted, and porn was so normalized. I do think that it's still very normalized for people of my generation. But what I'm noticing with the Gen Z is that they are starting to question it a lot, which is great to see. It's good to see that they're challenging what they've been taught about hookup culture and stuff like that. So I do think that, like, we maybe needed to go through these swings. If you've studied Hermeticism, you'll know that the principle of rhythm. If you pull the pendulum too far this way, which is purity culture and shaming people for their natural sexual desires and saying that they should only ever be with one person, it's naturally going to go the other way. Okay, and I know that with some of the things that I've said, if you watch my Sexual Misery podcast, where I talk about divine union and finding your genetic equal, that you should just actually, once you know that you have a genetic equal that is out there looking for you, you should actually enter into a period of celibacy and wait for that person, because you're actually cheating on your beloved if you're engaging with people who are not them. And I don't say that to shame people or to promote purity culture, okay? It's not about that at all. You should be entering into that choice. You should be making a sovereign choice to enter into that kind of period of celibacy. It has to be something that comes from you naturally. Both myself and my beloved Dominic, we both went through a period of several years of being celibate. Okay, obviously there was some breaks in between. He was in a couple of different relationships that he thought were his soulmate. I was, I went through the false twin flame interface, and I had like a false twin who was attached to a karmic, and that was really painful. And then I kind of completely gave up on the whole twin flame, and I just thought I just want to be with somebody who's like a good guy and treats me well, and I don't believe in any of this fucking genetic equal twin flame nonsense. And even when I was doing my training with my mentor Emily Harris, who is in union with her genetic equal, I did start believing that there was some truth to it, but I'd kind of given up hope that I would find it, even though kind of he came into my, this is a whole story that we need to tell around what happened, and how we kind of slowly came back together. But, you know, the reason why I say, well, wait for your beloved, is not because I'm trying to shame anybody for being with people that aren't their beloved. Like, it's not about that. Like, if you're connecting with somebody and you think that that could be your person, then, you know, it's not about, you know, there's nothing morally or ethically wrong with that, okay? And there was nothing morally or ethically wrong with either of us being with other people, okay? You know, I had a 6-year relationship before we got together. He had 3 relationships in that time, and that wasn't morally wrong, okay? And neither of us are, you know, giving each other a hard time for that. That would be crazy and stupid. But it is sad. It is really sad, and we both had to process a lot of grief around, not so much like, I don't have grief about him being with other people so much, and vice versa. But I have grief that I was with someone else, that I wasted so much time with somebody who wasn't loving me fully because I wasn't their person, and vice versa. And I could have been with him, like we would have found each other sooner. So that's why I say that, okay? Because when you do come into union with your beloved, you are going to have to process a lot of that pain. And shame as well, okay? This is another point that I've made here, okay? He's like, oh, there's so much shame around sexuality. So what do we do about that? We just get rid of the shame and we just fuck everyone, which is just ridiculous, okay? Shame exists for a reason, okay? God designed us so perfectly. Shame, fear, anger, like, I don't believe anybody who says that these negative emotions, you don't want to feel them, and negative emotions, you have negative emotions for a reason, okay? When we're witnessing a live stream genocide, we are angry for a reason, okay? That anger is the presence of love, okay? It's the presence of knowing that an injustice is being committed against humanity, and it moves us to act. Fear exists for a reason, okay? Everybody's saying, oh, fear is low vibration, you don't want to feel fear. Yeah, it's not pleasant to feel fear. It protects you though, okay? When you're fearful, you're just like, shit, I better not go there. I better not do that. I better prepare. It exists for a reason. Similarly, shame, okay? Both of us feel shame for some of the things that we did with other people before we met each other, okay? And that's with good reason, okay? Because some of those things were fucking wrong, and like, not like morally wrong in that we like violated anyone, but they were just, you know, just not, they were outside of God's design for us, okay? They were outside of love. And processing that shame has been very, very healing for both of us, okay? Shame exists for a reason, okay? Like I said in the Sexual Misery podcast, please listen to that, episode 3, I think it was, maybe episode 4, can't remember. We should bring back shame, okay? Because otherwise you got girls out there getting railed by 1,000 dudes in one day, and that is gonna do her some lasting damage, okay? All the OnlyFans creators who are doing these crazy things to try and get views, to try and make money, like, they could do with feeling a little bit of shame, okay? I'm not trying to shame them, but I don't think it's bad for them to feel ashamed, okay? I think that they should all be ashamed. I think that all the men that have participated in the gangbang should all be ashamed. I think because you're causing a degradation in society, okay? Those dudes that she's having that gangbang with, those are all somebody's beloved. That's somebody's soulmate that you're doing that with. Like, that's so fucked up. Like, come on, guys. Like, I shouldn't have to pussyfoot around this stuff. Like, this stuff should just be obvious, okay? There's nothing wrong with shame, otherwise we wouldn't feel it. Okay, so specifically, what are the accusations that have been made against them? So in the article, they talk about one of the rituals, which was at level 1, okay, so this is like the lowest level of initiation. This is for like the beginners, the noobs. They do a ritual where they get somebody to volunteer. Like, I can't believe I'm even saying this. This might have to go behind Patreon. But they get somebody to volunteer as a sacrifice, as a human sacrifice. And you basically set it up and you say what your boundaries are, like what you're not willing to have done to you. And so the woman that shared her experience in the article said that she went into the, I think they do it in groups of 3. So they have one person being the sacrifice and then 2 others who are going to sacrifice them or do something to them, do whatever. They're basically allowed to do whatever to you, but you're allowed to say what you don't want done to you, okay? And everybody's blindfolded. So she just said, don't scratch me, don't bite me, don't what was it? Let me find the exact words. Okay, my bad. This is not level 1. This is level 2, okay? Level 2 is a little bit more advanced. It's another level of initiation. Still bad, though. It's still bad. This is really bad, okay? So strong content warning. So in groups of 3, the students would take turns as the sacrifice, practicing surrender while the others touched them however they wanted within whatever limits the sacrifice chose and laid out. Lena volunteered to be a sacrifice in the first round. She sat on a yoga mat and put on a blindfold. Others around the room did the same. The rest of the students then circled the hall and selected their partners. 2 men sat down wordlessly with Lena. She carefully stated her boundaries. She did not want to be licked, spit on, or scratched. No touching of the face, no poking sensitive areas like her throat, no hair pulling, no fingers in her nose, mouth, or ears. Then the instructors turned on upbeat music and said it was time to begin. I don't even want to tell this story, but okay. Immediately, Lena was pushed backward by what seemed to be the force of a man's chest against her own. Before she had time to react, her skirt was lifted and her underwear was pulled down to her thighs. One of the men forced his penis into her vagina and began thrusting. Lena was frozen, stalled. She wanted to kick him away, but she was supposed to make an offering of herself. This was an exercise in surrender. The man's large belly, he is a bully, large belly, to say the least, kept pushing against her. This is a sacrifice ritual, she told herself. I'm the sacrifice now. The second man began to kiss and touch her gently. The whole experience lasted maybe 2 or 3 minutes until the man's penis went flaccid and he rolled off her. The leaders called time and the music stopped. The sacrifices were instructed to keep their blindfolds on until the other participants had regrouped on one side of the room. Those people would remain anonymous. When it came time to remove the blindfold, Lena was so disoriented, the lights in the room seemed to flicker. No one else, it seemed, had noticed anything amiss. It was just a man and a woman fucking at the sex retreat. So do read it in full, okay? Because she shares her experience and how she, and to fair play to her, because obviously they've set it up where, she didn't say that she didn't want to be penetrated, therefore she consented. But it's not, okay? You shouldn't have to say everything, like, please don't murder me, please don't slice me with a razor, like, please don't, you know what I mean? Like, this, it's come on, it's just, this should be just be obvious, okay? And the fact that she was blindfolded, she couldn't even identify who it was. The practitioners not the practitioners, the workshop leaders should have been able to identify who it was, and she did complain. And the way that her complaint was dealt with was she was told to kick a tree. She was told to kick a tree. And then another person that she spoke to, who was the partner of Ezrahi, who is the Israeli founder, told her that we all have predators inside us. and you have a predator too, and you're very fiery, so fire attracts fire, and basically told her that to do some shadow work, and it's an invitation for her to do shadow work and to acknowledge the predator inside herself, and to look at how she might have attracted that experience to her. And this is how I said in the reel on Instagram that they throw esoteric teachings in to legitimize the big sex orgy that they're having. But it's not just to legitimize it, it's also to set the stage up to facilitate the abuse and to gaslight the participants into tolerating the abuse and not even acknowledging that it is abuse, okay? Because, and I'm also this is where it interfaces with the Zionism and Israeli, because they teach a lot of Kabbalah. Now, those of you who've studied Kabbalah, okay, if you studied Kabbalah, you'll know that like law of assumption teachings are based upon Neville Goddard, all of that stuff is based on Kabbalah. And there is something to it, okay? That this is something that my teacher Emily Harris conveyed in a really powerful way, okay? When we're talking about the New Age or we're talking about false light, okay? The dark forces and your dark occultists who invert organic teachings and create New Age bullshit and false light, they cannot create anything, okay? They can't just create things out of thin air, just completely made up. They take original creation codes that have truth to them, and they water them down, or they invert them, or they just they'll just water them down mainly. But definitely inverting them can be an issue. But I think with Kabbalah, a lot of it is, there's certain keys that are missing, okay? Because with Kabbalah, they'll teach things like, very problematic things, like that Satan is actually God. Satan is the shadow side of God, that God created Satan. And yes, God created Satan, but God created free will, okay? So Satan became the Satan. There's no actual being called Satan, okay? There's just several different oppositional, any being that opposes God is a Satan or shaitan. So is satanic, right? So any being that follows the law of free will and goes against God's karmic laws of do no harm is acting in a way that is satanic, okay? God is not in control of that. But in Kabbalah, they will teach that Satan is like the other part of God, and God's in control of everything, and that God is actually like bringing about evil for some higher purpose. And it's all very nefarious, okay? They also teach that free will, in law of assumption, they teach that free will is an illusion, that everything is being controlled by the big mind that you can access with your subconscious. And there is some truth to this, okay? Yes, your beliefs can manifest things, okay? But saying that free will is an illusion and that there is no free will and everything is being controlled by the higher mind is just not true, okay? God is not doing the genocide in Gaza, okay? That's people that have gone against God, okay? It's really very simple, okay? If you get too deep into Kabbalah, you will end up becoming slightly psychotic and a little bit satanic in your thinking, okay? And this is what has set the stage for this type of abuse, okay? Because they teach radical self-responsibility, and they get people to sign a disclaimer when they go in saying that they will fully take responsibility for their experience, and they understand that everything that happens within the container is part of the transformational experience that they need to, look at what needs to be healed within them. So it's just spiritual gaslighting of the highest degree. And it's interesting because the accountability process that, ISTA are now being faced with through their peers in the sacred sexuality space, who basically compiled, there's Facebook groups where people have been sharing their experience and getting organized and putting together, an accountability system and the various demands that they've made, and they campaign to, shut down their events. So obviously it started creating a problem for ISTA, okay, because, they're disrupting their business. So how does ISTA surely you've attracted that circumstance to yourself. Like, take responsibility for your own creation, guys. Like, do you see how that works? Yeah, so I'm not going to go into detail about too many other things that... Oh, my top's covered in fluff. Yeah, so I'm not going to go too much into detail of the other accusations that were made against them. There's a Facebook group that people can join if they want to have a look at what people have complained about. I just want to be respectful to the victims that have shared their stories very bravely. Do have a look at the article, because they do share. There was another accusation that was made against Ezrahi that happened at a party that they held in Israel, okay, where one of the participants, one of the young girls she was a young woman, she had previously hired him for a yoni massage, okay, which is basically, it's a sex act that people will hire somebody to do, either a woman or a man, to massage the yoni and to de-armor it. It is a sex act, okay? It is sex work. But, it's slightly less sordid than going to just your average sex worker to get your rocks off, okay? Because it is supposed to de-armor the yoni. I have reservations about it. I don't think that it's an energetically clean practice to engage in. I understand why people do go to a yoni practitioner if they're single and they're, trying to release trauma in that way. But a lot of the accusations that were made against practitioners and people who were part of the ISTA community had happened during these yoni massages, in which the practitioner violated the consent of the patient or the customer, the client, and things that they hadn't agreed upon and that they hadn't consented to happened within that space, okay? And that is horrific, okay? Like, just because you've gone to a sex worker for a sexual service does not mean that you should be violated in other ways that you didn't agree upon. Similarly, if you engage sexually with somebody consensually and they do things to you that you didn't consent to, or that you've asked them to stop, that's also rape, okay? That's horrific and should not be happening to anyone, okay? And I'm glad that our society is moving forward and understanding these more nuanced areas of consent, okay? But what I did find particularly problematic, I was listening to a podcast from an ISTA practitioner. If you just search ISTA, it will come up as one of the top ones. It's an interview with two women. I won't say their names, but you can just look it up, and if you watch it, okay? She talks about, and she's a practitioner, she's a sexual practitioner, but she talks about her journey of awakening, sexual awakening. And she went to a yoni massage practitioner, and it was so crazy how she's telling the story of what happened. And she said, I went to him, and when he's like doing, he's basically like massaging her G-spot, which can produce female ejaculation, and she's literally screaming. She was like, I was so disconnected from my body that I'm screaming at him, stop, 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 stop. And instead of stopping, like an ethical sexual professional should be stopping, or anybody should be stopping, if somebody's screaming at you to stop, you should stop. If you don't stop, you're raping them now, okay? You're sexually violating them. And she was screaming, stop, 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 stop. And he was like, it's okay, don't worry, you're in safe hands. I don't care whether he says it nicely or not. He's still being a predator, okay? What he's doing is illegal. And then she was like, and then just water came out of me. And then I was just releasing water, and it didn't feel pleasurable at all. It was like a ayahuasca purge. I'm like, yeah, you were violated. And she she didn't even realize it. And then she's like, I just lay down and I was like, this is the most important thing that I've ever done. And I was just in shock, okay, that this person is a practitioner who's healing other people and doesn't even understand the basics of consent. It's really, really worrying, okay? And you know, I'm sorry to say this because she seems like a nice lady who's genuinely well-intentioned, but she needs to really reflect on what I'm saying here if she ever sees this, because it's deeply problematic that she doesn't understand that she was violated in that situation. And if she doesn't understand that, then she doesn't understand the fundamentals of consent, which is not good for anybody who is teaching anybody anything to do with sexuality. So yeah, other things that people complained about were that teachers would, you know, try and engage them intimately, emotionally, sexually, and, you know, really to open up their, you know, get them to drop their walls and get them to drop their guard so that they're intimate with the teacher. And think that there's something developing emotionally, because obviously physical intimacy is it's a manifestation of emotional intimacy, okay? And then, you know, just to be left confused and heartbroken and traumatized for the rest of the retreat while they watch that same teacher going around engaging with other people and just completely leaving them high and dry. That's serious fuckboy behavior, and that is not how you behave as a facilitator of a healing event where people are coming to you, often sexually traumatized, for healing, okay? That is so messed up, so out of integrity. Like, I don't understand people like, oh, well, you know, she consented. This is what's wrong with our society, okay? Because people don't understand like what even is sexual trauma, okay? If somebody has manipulated you into thinking that there is some kind of emotional connection between the two of you, so that you engage with them sexually, and then drops you straight after and treats you like a stranger. Like, I'm not saying that, like, if you engage with somebody sexually, you have to stay bonded to them forever. You know, if you notice red flags, or you decide that this connection is not the connection for you anymore, that you have to stay with them. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, and it's, you know, often something that women will complain about, that men will emotionally manipulate them into thinking that there's a connection, that there's a future relationship happening. They'll engage sexually, and then he just ghosts, okay? That is sexual abuse. That is sexual abuse, okay? And we need to be honest about it, and we need to be real about it. If we're ever going to be healing as a collective, okay, and healing this rift between the masculine and feminine. So yeah, some people have left events traumatized, psychotic, like people have actually left suffering from psychosis, have not been able to remember what happened to them, have been depressed for months or years afterwards, have been suicidal, have made attempts at their own life. And yes, okay, so maybe not all of that can be blamed on the event, because a lot of these people have pre-existing trauma, but it didn't help. Like, it didn't help. It was supposed to help, and it clearly re-traumatized them and did more harm than good, okay? So these people deserve, at the very least, a refund. But what happened when people tried to apply for a refund is the organism that they call it, the organization, asked them to sign an NDA, so they can't even talk about their abuse, which is, again, highly unethical. Okay, so this is one of the most compelling ones for me, that there was this animal sacrifice that is performed at the retreat. And this is how you know, okay, this is distorted mystery. This is not mystery school. This is a secret society. This is a satanic secret society. If they're performing blood sacrifice, that's a satanic secret society. That ain't no mystery school, okay? That's nothing that's going to connect you to God. That's connecting you to, demonic entities, okay? And usually this is why a lot of this stuff takes place. A lot of these people, predators that operate in this space, hosting these retreats, are hosting very nefarious demonic entities that are using them as a host, okay? They've become a dark portal because they're not connected to the stream that emanates from the Godhead. They're not in right alignment with God's law. They're not acting out of integrity, and the entity is using them as a host so that they can, because a lot of these demonic entities are very perverted, and they want to have sex with humans, okay? Because the physical realm that we're in is like it's very sensual, you know? So a lot of these entities might be people that have passed on in the spirit realm that are using humans as dark portals so that they can have sex with multiple women or multiple men or whoever, animals. God knows what happens in these places. I mean, it's all shrouded in secrecy. So facilitators aren't vetted for, this is one of the accountability systems that they call them 3SC, the body of volunteers within the sacred sexuality community who started the accountability process. One of the things that they wanted ISTA to implement is a vetting vetting facilitators for sexual or violent offences, and I find it absolutely crazy that this wasn't a thing, that they didn't vet people, especially that they are operating in Israel, okay? Because those of you who are here, y'all know Israel, the settler colony that illegally occupies stolen Palestinian land. Everybody is forced, most people, okay, there are certain exemptions, but most people are forced to serve in the Israeli occupation forces, okay? So they've participated in ethnic cleansing, in, forced removal, bulldozing people's homes, sniping children in the head. We've all been seeing what's been happening. If you've not been seeing it, please look at my stories. Please go look at my feed. I've been posting about what's been happening in occupied Palestine since October 7th. Yeah, it's a problem. Okay, so Izrahi, the founding member, he's Israeli. He is obviously made some really problematic statements about how the victim and the perpetrator are intertwined in this dance because the victim doesn't know how to speak up for themselves, and just so much bullshit that he was saying, which kind of makes sense because that's the Israeli mindset. I mean, y'all know, like, which film just won an Oscar? No Other Land, right? It's great that a film about the occupation of Palestine has won an Oscar, but Yuval Abraham, the Israeli journalist who co-produced and co-directed the film with Basil, the Palestinian, who was featured in as the protagonist. It's his village that's being destroyed in the West Bank by these illegal nutters, far-right settlers. And I do actually recommend that people watch the film. I did go and see it. I'm aware of the problematic statements that Yuval Abraham has made about October 7th, spreading, the atrocity propaganda, spreading the debunked mass rape claims. He really needs to get with the program. Like, at this stage in the game, I don't know how he's still so asleep. It's very, very programmed by Zionism. Like, I get that he tried to do a good thing, but like saying that like my people and his people our stories are intertwined. It's basically the same mindset. He was just like, the victim and the perpetrator are in this dance. It's that fucking colonizer mindset, okay? And, the same with this Kabbalic mindset. They probably believe that, like, the Palestinians are bringing... I mean, they do. They believe that the Palestinians are bringing it on themselves because of this fucking bullshit Kabbalah that they're into, okay, which is just, I just believe is just dark occultism. Maybe it didn't start that way, because obviously Kabbalah is a system that has been added to by various, different rabbis and occultists. I'm not saying that I do believe that there was an original codex of Kabbalah that follows God's law, but whatever is being taught is not it. So, Izrahi's partner, a woman called Michal Mayan Don, who is the most senior female facilitator in Israel, she was consulted about Lena's rape. And what she said to Lena was that we all have a predator inside us. You have a predator. I spoke about this. Okay, that's her. Okay, you have a predator too. Okay, now, sure, okay, it's a lot to do with shadow work as well. So, owning your shadows. Do you think that it sounds like a safe environment to enter a retreat in which people are in a shared field, engaging with each other sexually, with people that have owned their shadows, who have participated in genocide, okay, who have bombed people, who've dropped bombs on apartment blocks in Gaza, shredded children to pieces with some of these bombs, okay? Some of these bombs have got like blades that rotate, that shred people's bodies into pieces, okay? I've seen videos of children's bodies being shredded like meat, okay? This is what these people have been doing, okay? This is why I'm so passionate. This is why I've dedicated my life in speaking against this evil, okay? People that have owned their shadows after shooting children, Palestinian children, in the head, saying it's better to get them now while they're young, so that they don't grow up into dirty Arab terrorists, okay? These are the people that you're entering into a shared field with, okay? People who've integrated those kind of shadows. Do you think that sounds like a safe environment? I don't think so. So one of the rituals that they would get people to do is to insert a carrot into their rectum in order to feel grounded, okay? Feel that root chakra energy, okay? Obviously the back passage is connected to the root chakra, so they feel that grounded nature by sticking a root vegetable. Now, it's come to my attention through one of my followers, Hannes. Thank you so much for helping me with some of the information that helped inform my research for this podcast. He said that the Israeli occupation forces call, hang on, let me double check my notes. Yeah, so Israeli occupation forces slang for raping Palestinians, which they do systematically as a method of torture in their prisons. They've detained thousands and thousands of Palestinian hostages, which they've held without charge, many of them women, many of them children. They use rape as a systematic method of torture. It's very, very common. Many released detainees, released hostages have reported being raped, men and women. They even were the Israeli civilians were even recently protesting in the streets because two soldiers who'd been caught raping a Palestinian hostage on camera and were being held accountable. I can't remember if it was by a foreign government. I think maybe they got caught at immigration or something like that. They were protesting for the right to be able to rape Palestinian hostages. But this slang term that they use for raping Palestinian hostages is giving them a carrot. So are they getting ideas from ISTA? Or is ISTA getting ideas from things that they've done in the military detention centers where they're keeping these hostages? because I think that that's a really dangerous environment for people to be going into, okay? Because, yeah, a lot of their leadership is Israeli, okay? They're kind of an Israeli brand. So many of their, I don't know, every time I look up ISTA, people talk about Israel. We've had so many complaints of, from people that have attended their workshops in Israel. It seems like they really, really go hard on it very much seems like a lot of their practitioners are Israeli, and a lot of the complaints that I've read against practitioners who had trained with ISTA were Israeli. So it seems to be a big thing in Israel. And the US, which are basically the same entity, okay? Israel is colonized the US, okay? It controls the US government. AIPAC has bought all the politicians. Israel is a settler colony that was, originally founded by the Rothschilds, Lord Balfour, Cecil Rhodes, British, it was a British arm of the deep state that kind of founded it, and then they kind of abandoned it, and the US took it over. It's all deep state. It's a US military outpost. It's a military outpost for the deep state, okay? And the Zionists are one faction of the deep state. They're not the only faction. There are also various other sects within Freemasonry and various other secret societies. There's even a Muslim sect of Freemasonry called the Mecca Shriners, and the Nation of Islam are also connected to Freemasonry. Yeah, so one of the complaints was one of the founders was accused of trying to seduce students behind his partner's back. So clearly no E in ENM, ethical non-monogamy. There's no ethics in there, ethical non-monogamy. Just trying to get his dick wet. Another participant claimed that their body would shake uncontrollably following rituals, and they would tell themselves that their bodies were just releasing earlier trauma from before, as a result of now being in the safe container, when it was actually the trauma of the ritual itself and their boundaries being violated that they were shaking. So, one of the things that Lena, the girl who was raped in the sacrifice ritual, would kind of gaslight herself with, not to blame her, of course. This is obviously the situation that, she's been victimized by, the system that she's been victimized by. One of the things that she would kind of say to rationalize what happened was like, I guess it's good that it happened within this safe container rather than being raped out on the street. It's just like rape is rape. Like, it's not a safe container. This is not a safe container. So, she's obviously now acknowledged that, and in the article, to read the article, she's having a really difficult time of things and has not recovered from the trauma, and it's affected her life in a very, very negative way. Yeah, so I just want to make sure that I cover everything that's written in my notes. So I did mention before that sexually traumatized people will tend to have weak sexual boundaries because sexual trauma will cause you to become disembodied. So, entering into an environment in which people are engaging sexually is not a safe environment for anybody who's been sexually traumatized, okay? You need to be in a very, very safe container. And I would even say that, doing plant medicines and things like that is also not safe for somebody who has any kind of sexual trauma, not until extensive somatic healing, some kind of somatic methodology that you do yourself, not that somebody does on you. So Kundalini bodywork, I would not recommend for anybody who's is processing sexual trauma. You need to kind of do start feeling your body and start feeling your energy coming back into your body in a safe environment in which it's just you, okay? Not anyone touching you. Maybe you can go for a massage. I did find a lot of healing from going for regular massages with a female masseuse, just a standard massage, not like a yoni massage or anything like that, just standard massage, like deep tissue or whatever, with a female masseuse. But I'd also done a lot of somatic healing as well. Okay, so somatic healing can be breath work, it can be kriyas, like I teach in Reclaim Your Crown, my course, which is for specifically for trauma healing. We do lots of somatic practices, breath work to purify the body of sexual trauma. So something like that can be really good for healing sexual trauma. Obviously, if you find a local class of Kriya yoga, that can be really good. Just don't allow people to touch you until you've really connected with your body and you understand your boundaries and things like that. Because I've heard of people's boundaries being violated and sexual misconduct happening even within those kind of communities. So yeah, same goes for yoni massage. I wouldn't until you've learnt how to connect with your body and how to be more sovereign and how to comfortably consent to things, how to feel comfortable saying no to things, even when you're in a vulnerable, emotionally, physically vulnerable situation. Can you say no loudly, firmly, even if somebody is being pushy? Until you can do that, I wouldn't recommend anything in which anybody can touch you, because of what sexual trauma does to people energetically and how it weakens your boundaries. Okay, yeah, and then lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about the intersection of Epstein, the Mossad operation. Obviously, we know Epstein was a Mossad spy. Okay, now, this is not directly linked to ISTA, okay? This is just about, just looking at what is happening in Israel, okay? Obviously, we know that Epstein was a Mossad agent who was sent to blackmail politicians, news anchors, lawyers, just people of influence. Okay, he obviously was trafficking children. Basically, he had a bunch of young girls that him and Ghislaine Maxwell, who also was a Mossad spy, her father Robert Maxwell, who was a pedophile, he was also had dual Israeli citizenship. Okay. And both of them were tasked with getting blackmail on all these celebrities and all these politicians and for the purpose of doing the bidding of the deep state. Why do you think all the powerful players have been so complicit? Even, the members of the ICC and the ICJ who didn't want to take action. The genocide would have ended yesterday. Like, it would have ended on the first day if they hadn't got blackmail on everybody. It's that they're not just bought by AIPAC, okay? They're being threatened. And the same goes for, obviously, a lot of their leadership. Some of the articles that I read with people even calling them out were people that had served in the US military, okay? So there seems to be a major issue with both the US and Israel and massive sexual dysfunction. The UK, obviously, because the UK and the US are kind of synonymous culturally. Not exactly the same, like we obviously have some differences, but there's major issues happening with sexual dysfunction in West. Obviously Israel likes to align themselves with Western civilization. What the fuck is going on, guys? Like, we need to look at this stuff. We need deep sexual healing. So yeah, that's all I have for today. I haven't decided whether I'm going to put this in full on YouTube and Spotify and all the podcast players, or if I'm going to edit it down for Patreon. If I edit it down for Patreon, I will let you guys know. And yeah, let me know your thoughts. Okay, obviously this is a really triggering topic. I get very upset, very angry, very passionate talking about this because it's just such a blasphemy against the goddess. It's such a blasphemy against the original mystery school teachings. Obviously, I understand the distortions that happened within those mystery school lineages. Some of the priests and priestesses that were initiated into the mystery school lineages were responsible for those distortions from what I've channeled in the field. But that doesn't make it okay, and I will continue to speak against it, and I will, until we return back to the truth of, divine love and how God intended us to be in loving sacred union, and this is not it. Okay, so yeah, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts. Please leave a comment, smash the like button. Please share this with anybody who you feel needs to see it. I want this message to be reaching more people at this time, okay, because we don't have time to mess around. We need deep healing like yesterday. Okay, so thanks for tuning in, guys, and I will see you in the next episode. Peace out. One love.